Today we're going to start with 7.6, which is working with parameters. Now, you might remember we actually did some work with parameters before, and parameters mean when we have a situation such as the f of x equals, and somewhere in this function we're going to have a p, so we actually put a little p here next to the f, okay? And that means that we're going to have, for example, x squared plus 2x plus p. Okay, so that little p is notated to show that there's a p somewhere in the function. Okay, and I think we talked about this, but for example, if we want to make that p a 1, then we would say the f1 of x is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1. The f3 of x is going to be x squared plus 2x plus 3. And that goes on. Okay, so we can put any numbers in there and we notate it at the start like this. Now, the textbook doesn't do it so much for you this year, but you need to be familiar with this notation for next year anyway, so I'd rather teach it to you now. Okay, so today with these parameters, we're going to start just by looking at substitution. Okay, now at this point, the substitution doesn't actually have anything to do with the parameters, but you're going to need this skill for later. Okay, so substitution. For example, if I have fx equals, and we'll keep it easy at the moment, we'll use a linear equation, so we'll say 2x plus 1. Okay, this is a function. So the y is calculated by 2x plus 1. Okay, now substitution just means that we put a different letter in place of the x. Okay, so for example, if we want the f of 3, we do 2 times 3 plus 1, which equals 6 plus 1, which equals 7. Okay, now, most of the time at the moment, we're not going to just be doing this with numbers, okay? So for example, we might have the f of p, and there's that p for parameter again, okay? And then in that case, we're going to get 2p plus 1. So p just replaces the x. That's it. Okay, we might also have a slightly harder situation where we have the f of p plus 3. And that means that instead of writing x, so instead of putting an x up here and up here, we're going to put that p plus 3 in. Okay, now this is where it gets a little bit trickier because you need to make sure that you use brackets. Okay, so we have 2 brackets, because normally we would just have the x here, but we need to put that whole p plus 3 in. So p plus 3 plus 1. And in this case, we should now try and simplify it. Okay, so that's going to be 2p plus 6 plus 1, which gives us 2p plus 7. All right, now this is, as I said, fairly straightforward. It's a linear equation. Okay, we're also going to be doing these with quadratic equations. Okay, so it's important we get this right. So let's try some quadratic examples as well. All right, so if we have f of x is equal to x squared plus 4x minus 6. Okay, if we want to know the f of p, that means we just put p in instead of x. So it's just going to be the same, but p squared plus 4p minus 6. Okay, if we want to make it a little bit harder and do the function of p minus 1, then we get p minus 1 squared plus 4p minus 1 minus 6. Okay, now again, in this case, we need to simplify it. This is where, again, it's really, really important, guys, that you know your expansions for a square. You need to remember that a plus b squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And that 2ab is the bit that most people forget all the time. Please don't forget it. All right, it's really important. You're going to need this year and also next year. Okay, if we have a minus b, it's the same, a squared, except it's minus 2ab. And it's still plus b squared. Okay, whoops, that should have a square here. So please make sure you don't forget about this middle term. People forget it all the time when they square things. All right, It makes me very, very sad when I see it. Okay, so let's simplify this. We get p squared. Now, it's minus 2ab, so it's the terms multiplied together. So we have minus 1 times p. Okay, that's the terms multiplied together. And then double it. So 1p is just p, and double that makes 2p. Okay, so minus 2p plus. And now the second term squared, so minus 1 squared is just 1. All right, plus 4p minus 4 minus 6. Okay, and that's just again from just expanding these brackets. Okay, that gave us the 4p minus 4. All right, we simplify it further. We only have one term where p is squared, so we're just going to write p squared here. Now for the 2p, for p on its own, we have minus 2p plus 4p, which gives us 2p. All right, so we have plus 2p. All right, then for the constants, we have 1 minus 4, and that gives us minus 3. Minus 6 gives us minus 9. Okay, and we have simplified it. This is it for the moment. This is as hard as it gets. The only other thing you may find where it gets a little bit, not stranger, but just another variation would be that I could ask you for the f of minus p. Okay, and if we go back to this question here, then we have minus p squared, and you have to remember that we have brackets around that minus p. Okay, it does not become the negative of p squared, okay, because minus p has replaced that x. Okay, plus minus p, 4 times minus p minus 6. Okay, and then we can simplify that to p squared minus 4p minus 6. Okay, and that's that for substitution.